the amount of fitness required to drive an Indy car is like, I don't fully understand it, but I see it, from the outside looking in. Everyone's training so hard. Like, these cars have so much downforce, no power steering. Yeah. Like, it must be insane.
I would say the Indy car is probably the most raw race car that you can drive right now. I mean, this year's Formula One cars have gotten closer to that because they look a little more on edge. But in years past, you would look at an F1 onboard and, like, you and I look at it and know it's not easy because they're carrying so much speed through the corners and they're braking so deep.
Yep.
But, like, the actual steering input is like, like
mellow,
like nice, right?
Yeah.
Whereas you watch an onboard from an IndyCar and you're like, this guy's hanging on for dear life.
Yeah.
And the reason is that there's no power steering, there's no power brakes, so you're fighting the kickback on the wheel. And the tracks that we race on are inherently a little more bumpy and kind of ragged than some of the FIA, really smooth tracks. Yeah. Even their street circuits look like. Yeah. I mean, Miami had some bumps this year, but like for the most part, their street circuits are pretty tame. Whereas like, you go to Nashville last year and you're going over the bridge and like the car's barely touching the ground over seams. And
yeah, dude, that thing, it looked like something out of Mario Kart.
Yeah. Rainbow Road.
Yeah.
with country music.
Yeah, exactly.
So just the raw physicality of it is like, I remember my first couple IndyCar races, like it is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. So you have to train so hard. And like, I think I was pretty fit when I started, but like I'm definitely fitter now.
Right.
The load in the wheel, like to, somewhere like Barber, where it's very high grip and they recently repaved it. Like we maybe seen, 3.8, maybe 4G peak in a couple of the corners where you have a big compression and a lot of lateral load. But you get to a point where in that race, when you put in new tires, like new Firestone Reds and full tanks, that like, once the tires are up to temp and you've burnt a little bit of fuel, so you're kind of at that peak of lap time, you are literally limited by your physical power of like how hard you can turn the wheel. Like that becomes the limiting factor.
Really? That's insane to hear.
Yeah. And the current car is a little bit quicker, I think, than the Aero Kit car was, but I did have a chance to drive the Aero Kit cars back when Chevy and Honda had their own separate kits, right?
Yeah.
And I drove one at Watkins Glen and one at Road America. And those cars in road course trim were producing like 7,000 pounds of downforce or something absurd, right? And their top speed was a lot slower than like we're going a bit faster now, but we have so much more top speed than those things did.
Yeah.
Like I think that was probably the most grip you could have given a car in a corner and have a human still drive it without power steering.
That's insane. Like, so try and explain to me like what kind of, in like weightlifting terms, what kind of like, poundage is required on the steering wheel in that peak lap time?
I would say peak, like somewhere like, so the hardest, two examples. So last year, and this year I was kind of ready for it, so I knew it was going to come, but in 2021 at Barber, and it was the first race of the year, and it's the first race back after a long off season. Like, it doesn't matter how much you've worked out, how much you've tested, it's always going to be tough. And it's usually St. Pete, which is cardio really hard, but like upper body not terrible.
Okay.
But it was Barber that year because COVID and stuff got mixed around. And I remember the last stint was on Reds, which is a softer, grippier tire. And going into turn one is like, it's a 90-degree corner roughly, but it's downhill. And it's a fifth gear corner. Minimum, your apex speed is like 120 miles an hour or something like that. And I remember building the load in the wheel, getting to the apex as I'm going down the hill and everything's loading up. And I get halfway to the apex and like, I physically cannot turn the wheel anymore. And I'm like fully straining and like almost feeling like I'm going to pass out. Like I went like lightheaded because I strained so hard. And I just got to a point where I was like, lift. Because I was either don't finish the corner or,
wow.
like that's like it just locked down, right? And now, and like, so for the rest of that, for the next 5 laps when the tires still had the edge on them, I would basically come off the brakes and just be like just turn it quick and just get it there and like prop my elbow up against the tub and be like, and then like now this year knowing that, like definitely focused on a bit more upper body than I had in 2020 off season.
Right.
But it would be like, imagine you're holding your steering wheel and you've got like an axle two bearings, or two pillow block bearings in a bar, and let's say your bar is like 3 feet, 2.5 feet or so, it would be like putting 40 pounds on that bar, kind of
and
thing,
holding
and
it.
trying to, like, I can't remember what the actual Newton meter like torque value is, but it's high. Like, just, like,
it's all your effort.
It is like, we're, both same size roughly.
Sure.
Like, it is as hard as you could turn the wheel. Like, that's what these cars get to.